Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is Nadine Heidinger, and I'm the Director of Communications at the National Arts Club. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, we host over 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. To find out more about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. On behalf of our literary committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event featuring legendary New Yorker and Vanity Fair cartoonist Edward Sorel, who will speak with Graydon Carter, the editor and founder of the weekly subscription newsletter Airmail, about Sorel's memoir, Profusely Illustrated. Carter, then the longtime editor of Vanity Fair, commissioned the celebrated Waverly mural from Sorel after buying the Greenwich Village restaurant in 2006. Sorel's latest book, Profusely Illustrated, is a vivid and witty portrait of the artist as a young New Yorker. Sorel grew up in the Depression-era Bronx, learned to draw as a child while at home with pneumonia, and attended the city's famed High School of Music and Art. Later, he helped launch Pushpin Studios, the hottest design group of the 1960s. With the aid of 172 drawings and cartoons, Sorel charts the highlights of his remarkable life and career, showing us how in murals, cartoons, and comic strips, he steadily lampooned and celebrated American culture and political life. Tonight's feature book can be purchased at a discount from our preferred independent bookseller, Books on Call, via a link that we'll be sharing in the chat shortly. Following the discussion will be a very brief Q&A, so please feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions you might have. And without further ado, let me turn it over to Edward Sorel and Graydon Carter. Please enjoy the conversation.
So Ed, can I just say something? I want to say a few things about Ed Sorel before we get going. And that, I mean, there are a lot of writers who also drew, like Tolstoy and Hermann Hesse, D.H. Lawrence, Victor Hugo, but I will tell you, I think, and that they drew okay, not well. You're right as well as you draw, which is an incredible statement. I mean, I think your two memoirs, the Mary Astor one and this, are so beautifully written and so evocative and so touching. And I can't imagine somebody who has both these sides of their brain working in concert, and this book is I think it's a small masterpiece, and I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about it.
Jesus, if you had told me that 50 years sooner, I never would have gone into art.
Which is harder?
Well, for me, art is harder because I think I know what I'm doing there, but writing, I don't know what I'm doing, so it's kind of easy.
They're both involve blank pages.
Yeah. And, the computer does the spelling for me, so that's easy.
It can, yes. Now, so let's just go back for a bit. We'll come to Pushpin. And I mean, the fact is that you may be the only living artist or artist ever who's done covers for Ramparts, The Atlantic, New York, Esquire, Time, The Voice, The New Yorker, and even Screw magazine. And I'm probably missing some here.
Screw is a challenge.
No, but it's an extraordinary career. I just want to go back quickly to your childhood. I love the fact that your mother was an angel, your father was a devil, and that you came up with this alternative Hollywood family of great character actors.
That's true. The movies were very important to me. The Saturday matinee. The supporting actors were my family because you saw them week after week after week. They were all on contract, and I loved them. And the Franklin Pangborn and Zazu Pitts and Donald Meek. Yes, and they were more interesting than my family. and I just loved them. And then the only part of the paper that I used to read were the movie reviews, and they meant a lot. And I always loved to draw them, and I still do.
So let's go back. Okay, so you go from Cooper Union, and then you are part of a group that of amazing talent, Seymour Schwass and Milton Glaser and Walter Bernard, ultimately, that formed Pushpin. Tell us a bit about that. This extraordinary, and it still goes, doesn't it? I mean,
well, the first year out of Cooper Union, I got fired. It's hard to believe, but I got fired from 9 jobs my first year out of Cooper Union, which wasn't a tragedy, because every time I got fired, I got more money on the next job that I got. And I finally ended up at Esquire, where I was actually able to do it. And I was there for about 6 months, when all of a sudden I find Seymour Quast sitting in front of me. And he was very embarrassed to be there, because he had just been fired from from the Llewellyn studio, which was a top flight design studio. And he was embarrassed to be doing what I was doing. He and Milton were the 2 top students at Cooper Union. And suddenly there he was with me, and who was on the lowest rung of Cooper Union. And we'd have lunch together, and he kept complaining about what hack work we were doing.
but wait a minute, this is Esquire during the Harold Hayes years. This is
No,
the great.
it's just before the Harold Hayes years.
Okay.
We had an art director there named Submergent. There were 2 years in New York when, if you had an Armenian name, they automatically made you an art director. And this particular Armenian had no talent whatsoever, and Esquire was a mess. And so we got fired, but so did he. There was one Monday when 3/4 of the art department and the art director got fired. And that's when Harold Hayes made an appearance after we left.
Okay, so Pushpin.
And so Seymour was going to get another job. And well, before we got fired, we did this promotion piece to get work, because we wanted to do something original. And we did a parody of the old almanacs, and we sent it in an ordinary number 10 envelope, and it caught on.
Like, who did you send it to?
Talked about.
Who would you send it to?
We sent it to all the art directors in New York. There was a way of getting a list. There was something called Noble's List. It listed all the art directors at magazines and books and advertising agencies. And we sent it out. The only cost was the postage and the paper. We got an ad from a typographer, and we got an ad from a printer. And when we got fired, I suggested to Seymour that we try to make a studio out of our almanac. He was hesitant, but we did it. Seymour had been renting a corner of a dance studio where during Cooper Union, he and some friends did placemats for Wanamaker's and greeting cards and things like that. And now we suddenly, he would be the talent, because I had forgotten how to draw after Cooper Union, and I would be the salesman. So I lived in the studio, and I got work for Seymour.
Okay, so you're called at some point. You're called back to Esquire to do the cover for what became the most famous article, both in Esquire and maybe ever, which was Gates Elisa's article that had it's like a mythological article almost, called Frank Sinatra Has a Cold, and you get a call from George Lois.
Yeah.
And George Lois is the art director there.
George Lois is the art director, and all his covers, all his brilliant, brilliant covers had all been photography. But of course, when he told Frank Sinatra what he wanted him, how he wanted him to pose for the cover, he wanted Sinatra to have a cigarette in his mouth and having hands attempting, 5 or 6 hands attempting to light his cigarette, because the article that Gay Talese wrote was all about the flunkies that he had around him. And of course, Sinatra refused to pose for it. So he called me to do the cover. I had just been starting to do my, I don't know what to call the style. It was a spontaneous kind of drawing style, which I had just started to do. And I got so scared by the assignment that I didn't do that. I did a very rendered picture of Frank Sinatra, and George looked at it and he rolled his eyes and said, "You got to do it over. I'll give you 24 hours. You got to do it over." So I had 24 hours to do it over, and I worked through the night, and he loved it. So, and it changed my entire career, being on the cover of Esquire.
You know, I can see George's apartment from this office I'm in here in New York, and I can see Gay Talese's house from my office in Connecticut. They're both still moving around and great. It's wonderful that you're all still alive. So then you go to CBS at some point. Is that with Lou Dorfman, or was he gone by then?
No, Lou Dorfman, when Lou Dorfman was put in charge of radio, and William Golden was made head of television, and I was offered a job after I left Pushpin. I was offered a job from both of them, and of course I took the television one. William Golden was the guy who created the CBSI.
Oh, I thought it was Lou Dorfman. Okay, interesting.
No, it was William Golden, and of course his problem was that he didn't know where the talent was as Pushpin, and the talent was really Milton and Seymour.
That's debatable. Yeah,
because they were really designers. I never wanted to be a designer, and I wanted to make pictures. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to do character assassination, but I wasn't interested in design, and that's all that CBS wanted. And George, of course, was a brilliant designer, and finally I left CBS and started freelance, and it worked out.
Well, I love your children's book have a certain 60s look to them. And then in your book, you should run this picture that you've done in black and white of William F. Buckley. When I first saw it, I thought it was a David Levine drawing. But was he an influence at all at the time?
An influence. I plagiarized from him. Listen, here's what happened. I was freelancing and had absolutely no intention of becoming a caricaturist. I had no talent for it, no inclination for it. But when my marriage broke up and I didn't have a place to work because I worked from my apartment, the only job I could get was from Victor Novoski, who had a pathetic political humor magazine called Monocle.
I loved it, but yes.
Well, it
looked a bit like Almanac. Your Almanac is long and thin, is it?
No, no. The Monocle. The long, thin one was a weekly, but he had a monthly magazine called Monocle,
okay,
and that was time size. And and David Levine would occasionally work for Monocle for $25 a page, incidentally. Victor, he and Tommy Ungerer and Ed Koren were willing to work for $25 a page just to do left-wing political anger. And so I knew David Levine and had no hesitation at all in copying his style and his half of the work that was being done during the 60s were people imitating David Levine, and I was one of them. And
well, you went. I think you went way beyond David Levine. I think you when you started introducing color into your work, you have a way with color that is like, it's singular these days.
Well, that's because they didn't teach color at Cooper Union, so I was able to find.
You're not big on Cooper Union.
I am big on Cooper Union for.
It was free. It was free.
It was free, and I owe everything to Milton and Seymour. They were the ones who saved me, and I'm forever grateful to them.
Well, I remember when we were there's a long process we went through in doing the mural at the Waverly Inn. A lot of discussion over who should be in the mural. And it was a bit like your Sistine Chapel. It was, sometimes it was difficult to get you going. You'd get angry with me, but the thing that you told me that drove you was that you wanted Milton to come into the restaurant and see the mural.
Yes. I was, to the end of his life, I was trying to convince him that I was worth having dinner with.
Wait, is he that much older than you?
No, he's a few months younger than I am, but he was Milton, especially when he became very famous, was the most condescending person in the world.
Okay.
And whenever I was with him, I felt like a little boy.
Oh,
and so yes, the mural that I did for you was going to get me respect at last.
Where do you rate Hirschfeld?
Oh, I loved Al's stuff.
Yeah.
He had a trick, and he did it beautifully. It was a minimalist trick. The truth about Hirschfeld is, just as I stole from David Levine.
He stole from Aubrey Beardsley, you're going to say, right?
No, he stole from Covarrubias.
Oh, not really.
Yes, really. You've never seen Covarrubias's black and white stuff.
I have. Well, yes, he used to draw them for Vanity Fair in the old days.
Well, Covarrubias was he and Covarrubias shared a studio space.
I didn't know that.
And when Hirschfeld went to Tahiti, because that was the thing to do when you had money, he found Tahiti had turned into a hellhole because of the tourists. Covarrubias had a studio at one of the other islands in the area, and he went to stay with Covarrubias there. So they were very close.
Well, how would they get their work back to New York? Because they're both. That's how they made the money for magazine.
He would take off for a while. I mean, he studied in Paris. He lived the life of a real artist. Hirschfeld did, even if his work was not art, museum art. But he was a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Now, I don't know if you remember, but I used to try to get you to work. I think I called you when I was at Spy Magazine to do things for us. Yeah. And I think you turned me down, which you appropriately should have. You weren't the first. Bruce McCall turned me down when I was there. Christopher Hitchens turned me down. But then when I got to Vanity Fair, I reached out to you again.
Well, it was all about money. You didn't have your page rate. Your page rate at Spy was almost as bad as Monocle.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And but Once you had money, I loved you.
So I think the first thing you brought to me was sort of a Moses dog with the dog 10 Commandments, which I think we'll probably see later on.
No, you're misremembering.
Okay.
The first job I had from you was the Bush gang.
Oh, was that the first one?
Capturing
Saddam Hussein.
Whatever his name was.
Saddam Hussein.
Yeah. But I loved working for Vanity Fair.
So then we the way I don't know that you know this. So we the last person we fought over for the mural at the Waverly Inn was Art Young, and you said, "Great, you've got to have Art Young, and he's the greatest political cartoonist of the late part of the 19th century and the early 20th century." And I wasn't that familiar with his work. I am now, and he is incredible. And he's bald and he's got gray hair like this. And the first time I took my youngest child to the Waverly Inn, she was like 3 at one point. She sees the picture of Art Young on the wall. She goes, "Daddy!" Remember, you got him with a pen going into like an Esky character on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
I forgot how long that took you, but it was 3 or 4 months.
It was the only time I really lied to you. He was a communist cartoonist who was loved by the left wing, but the Main Street America did not know Art Young.
No, I understand, but that collection that came out 2 years ago, his work is magnificent.
It is. He was really good.
So many of the things you've done over the years, and we'll see them, and the things they're both either classical references or film references, like Jimmy Carter in High Noon on the cover of Time magazine.
Yeah, that was. You're always dealing with icons of one, either political or entertainment icons. There's very little enjoyment in caricaturing somebody that nobody knows what they look like.
Right.
But
when did you get this? I mean, you told me once you drew with it had number 16 pen or something. Okay, well, you have a certain kind of paper, a certain kind of pen, and a certain kind of ink. Right.
I work with a speedball number 6 pen point, and because I never learned how to use this, I used it incorrectly, but it worked for me.
You never used a straight pen?
Oh yeah, sure. A dip-in pen, a real. But no, I would never use any mechanical pen. I used. There's something popped up. What is that? Oh, it has nothing to do with us.
And then, what kind of paper do you use?
I use bond, a translucent bond. It's called marker paper, marker bond, and it should be either 16 or 18 pound bond paper. There is a 13-pound bond paper, which is the most translucent of all, but it wrinkles too easily. So I go for 16-pound bond.
And how do you get you get reds that are absolutely extraordinary reds and yellows that are extraordinary yellows?
What I do, because I don't know what to do about color, I put a ground down. In other words,
what does that mean?
Once the paper is mounted, once the black and white cartoon is mounted, I put yellow ochre or some other color over the whole thing, so that no matter what color I put on top of it, whether it's a blue or a red or a purple, that other color shows through, and so it holds together.
Interesting.
It has, and sometimes you want a night scene, you put blue under the whole thing, and no matter what you put on the blue, it's a night scene.
And you laid that on with a big, thick brush?
Yes, the fattest brush you can find.
And this is watercolors.
Watercolor, yeah.
Is it like Winsor and Newton?
Well, for the fine stuff, you use Winsor, or Raphael is even better than Winsor Newton. And
where do you get now that Pearl Paints is gone, where do you get your equipment?
Well, Blick,
yeah.
Lick is the biggest one now. But you're local, there are still about half a dozen art supply stores in New York. And
okay. You read in your book a bit about George Grosz. Do you rate him, or do you find him just too harsh on his subjects?
Oh, I think he's wonderful.
Yeah.
And my favorite is Otto Dix.
Otto
Dix is great. And that whole German expressionist period is my favorite period in art. And my favorite painter is Max Beckmann.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing is, you and I had lunch with David Downton and Hilary Knight and Jim McMullen and Cullen Murphy a while back. And the fact is that you and Hilary and Jim are all in either your 80s or approaching your 90s, and you have lines that are as sure as they must have been when you were in your 20s. What do you attribute that to? That's extraordinary.
It's dumb luck. My hands are as good as they ever were. The only thing I notice being older is I vacillate more. I've lost a certain amount of daring, I think, but the pictures are still as good.
I mean, do you want to go? Should we go through some of the pictures and then come back? I've got a lightning.
I've got
a lightning round I want to ask you.
The first picture that we'll come to involves you, because it's the picture I showed you. There it is. It's when I turned you down at Spy Magazine, I got a call from you a week or two later inviting me to lunch. And knowing that I was going to have lunch with you, I showed you a sketch. And this is the finish of the sketch that I showed you. And when you turned me down, I sent it to the New Yorker, who had turned me down 20 years earlier, and I never went back to them. But since I had this cartoon and I was having lunch with the art director of the New Yorker, who happened to be a friend, I showed him this sketch, and 3 weeks later, I had a full page. I broke into the New Yorker with a full page of. Oh
my God! Was that Lee Lorenz?
That was Lee Lorenz. Yeah.
Well, there's no way I turned this down for Spy Magazine. That's impossible.
Listen, I remember your exact words. I handed you the sketch for this, and you gave it a weak smile, and you said, "It's got Lee Lorenz's fingerprints on it."
Okay, then I must have thought I thought you'd shown it to him, and then.
Yeah, you thought it was a New Yorker reject, when in point of fact, I had never appeared in the New Yorker prior to it. Anyway, we've got enough of this. Let's see what follows this. There's the Frank Sinatra cover that was done overnight, and it changed my career. And I did the little drawings that accompanied the article inside. I didn't know, I was so panicked, and it shows. I mean, anyway, that was the Esquire cover. It now is in the National Portrait Gallery in Washington.
Wow.
Let's move it. Let's see what's coming. This was done in 1967. It was one of the very few times that I did a piece of finished art, certain that Ramparts would buy it. It never occurred to me that they would turn it down, but they did, because I don't know whether they felt they had done too much anti-clerical stuff about the war. but I love this poster. And when they turned it down and the nation turned it down, the personality posters made a poster of it. But
that's Cardinal. Who is that in there?
That's Cardinal Spellman, of course. I'm sorry, I should realize that people nowadays don't know who Cardinal Spellman was, but he was a war hawk who was all in favor of Vietnam. And his successor, Cardinal Cook, went over to Vietnam and told the soldiers that you are friends of Christ because you are here. So the day that this got off the press, it was printed in Chicago, was the day that Cardinal Spellman died. And as a result of that, it was not sold in any store in New York, in the country. One store in Chicago had it in its window and got its window smashed for its trouble. What's coming next? Oh, we're going backwards in time to my David Levine period. This is my wife and I did a book called Word People. It was about people whose name became part of the language. And this is Guillotine, who gave us the word. And then there's another one coming next. I guess not. I guess I just put one in. This is sometime later, and I was Walter Bernard was the art director of Time magazine at that time, and I did my best Time covers for him. This is about this is about Iran. Carter had foolishly allowed the Shah of Iran to come to the United States for a heart operation after he had been overthrown. And that's when they got very angry at the United States and took over the embassy. And nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. Yeah, that's Carter as Gary Cooper in High Noon. I don't know what's going to come now. Let's see. That's New York was the first magazine that gave me that I sold my own stuff to, and this was about Truman Capote, who had, because of drugs and alcohol, he was unable to finish his book about high society. So he sold a few of the stories that he was going to have in his novel to Esquire. And when the high society ladies read what he said about them, of course, they were horrified, and one of them committed suicide because he essentially accused her of murdering her husband. And she did kill him, but she said she thought it was a burglar. And so this is illustrating an article by Liz Smith. And I had different media ways of drawing different things. This was done with the grease pencil and color. It wasn't done with a pen.
The people in the background look a bit like that New Yorker cartoonist Saxon, who I used to love.
Well, I never stole from Saxon.
Oh.
Just,
I'm not saying you did.
The only thing that illustrators have to work with is gesture. And And I learned to be good at gesture.
Very good.
And I learned to be very good at hands, because when I was at CBS, I overheard George Lois laugh at the way I drew hands. And ever since then, hands are usually twice as big as the face when I draw pictures, just to show off that I can do hands now. Next one, what's the next? This is another grease pencil one. This was also for New York Magazine. It was when Nixon was forced to resign, and Gerald Ford became president. I drew Son of Frankenstein. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see Nixon hypnotizing him, telling him that you will grant me clemency, you will grant me clemency.
I love the White House in the bottom right as well.
Yes, a very Gothic White House. Okay, enough of this. Let's see what's not coming. This was the very first encounter. Nancy and I began doing a series in Atlantic Magazine called First Encounters. They were true stories about first meeting between certain celebrities. This is the meeting between George Sand, who smoked cigars and wore pants, and Chopin, who was tubercular. We did these series for 14 years, and after 14 years, Knopf put them all in a book. So you'll see that the next one will be my very favorite one of those 14 years of, no, I guess I didn't include it. I'm sorry. I wish I could have showed it to you. This is just one of the posters I did for one of the marches on Washington. I had, by the time when the Vietnam War started, coincided with my attending Friends meeting. The Society of Friends is the actual name. Quakers are called Quakers because that's what people who wanted to make fun of them called them. It was a derogatory term, but my wife and I became Quakers, even though we're both atheists. We believe that the atheists did a lot of good, that the Quakers did a lot of good work. So we attended. That's where I met my wife, as a matter of fact. It was in a Quaker meeting. But we started to protest in 1963. This poster, you can see, is from 1971. So the war just would not end. And no matter how many marches we had, it would not end. And I get speechless and start to stutter when it comes to Vietnam. So let's go on to the next one. This is the cover that I did for Screw. Steve Heller was the art director of Screw. I didn't want to do any naked women. I wasn't particularly good at life drawing, and I was too inhibited to do that kind of stuff. So the Watergate was going on at the time, and Judge Sirica, who you see there, was assigned with listening to the tapes that that suddenly became available. I won't. The tapes here suggest an unhealthy relationship between Bibi Rebozo and Richard Nixon, in which they're doing something naughty, and Bibi Rebozo says, "Thank you, Mr. President." Anyway, I want to mention that you see that priapic E in Screw with the middle one having an erection. That was designed by none other than Milton Glaser.
Wow.
Let's go on to the next one. And that's my end paper. That was done for American Heritage. They had an issue on the Second World War, and it was decided that this was the favorite movie about World War II, was Casablanca. I might say a few things about the people in there. Most of them are from Europe, is the first thing to say, and most of them escaped just in time. There's the man to the left of Humphrey Bogart, hiding behind a pillar, was the man who played in Grand Illusion. And because I can't do names anymore, his name isn't coming to me. But he was a great star in France, but he only had bit roles in Hollywood movies when he got here. He played in Grand Illusion. He played a man named Rosenthal, and after the Germans took over Paris, they put posters on all the lampposts with his picture to let the Germans know what a Jew looks like, to all of France. This is what a Jew looks like. There's next to Ingrid Bergman is Paul Anried, who in his German movies was Paul von Anried. And I guess that's all. And my favorite of all actors was Conrad Veidt, who unfortunately had to play Nazis all during the war. Well, let's see what else we have. This is the summit meeting between Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan. If you can't read it, I'll read it for you. It's Gorbachev calls Reagan a capitalist pig. Reagan calls Gorbachev a communist snake, white racist, Jew hater, fundamentalist schmuck, atheist asshole, Bonzo's co-star. That's not funny. And let's go on. There it is. There's my favorite from First Encounters. Oh, I'm so glad I included it. This is, I could never do this again. I love this picture. It's Degas. It's Mary Cassatt showing her paintings to Degas in her studio. And they became friends. Degas had only one little shortcoming. He hated Jews. And during the Dreyfus affair, he absolutely refused to talk to any of his friends who believed that Dreyfus was innocent. And as a result, he lost many friends. But I love that picture. We can just look at it for the rest of the show if you want. But perhaps we should move it on. And that's the cover to my very last children's book, which is a very autobiographical story. It's about a boy who loves going to the movies on Saturday. And there he is studying Errol Flynn in Dawn Patrol while his dog is studying the stills from a Rin Tin Tin movie. Let's have the next one, please. And that is my version of Lowe's Paradise, where in the movie, in the book, I and my mother, or the boy who's like me, goes to the Lowe's Paradise, which is a special treat. It was a great movie house. And and this was Tina Brown's first cover as an editor of the New Yorker. and she chose one of my sketches. And I was so excited about doing a New Yorker cover. I was 61 years old, and I never thought I would ever make the New Yorker because I thought my style was too overworked. It wasn't as spontaneous as most of the New Yorker artists were. And I was so proud of being on the New Yorker that I signed my name so large as it was ridiculous. You really can't see it from here, but it's pretty big. And one more. This is a sketch. I began doing covers in the fall. I did 9 fall covers for the New Yorker. Once Tina liked my work, and I don't know how long I had been doing it when I came up with this idea. I think it was one of the early ones. I liked the idea of nymphs and satyrs getting old, and these are middle-aged satyrs, and he's reading the Wall Street Journal. And anyway, let's get to the finish. I just wanted to show how the sketch turns into a finish. There were things about the sketch that really were better than the finish, but I liked her expression in the sketch better than I do here. And as you can see, I wasn't too good at drawing. She's got the shoulders of a football player. That wasn't what I had in mind, but anyway, that was one of my favorite covers. Is there anything left? Oh yeah, I did a series for New York Magazine on taxis, and then I expanded on it for American Heritage. So we did a history. This was the very first taxi in New York where the driver was outside the carriage altogether, which is a promising beginning. I'll be surprised at what comes next if there is anything more. Oh, this is a gag cartoon for the New Yorker. A single panel with some dialogue at the bottom is called a gag cartoon, and the line here, which is missing, is this desolate guy at the bar is saying, "Before we got married, she seemed like the kind who would suffer a fool gladly." And let's go on to the next one. And this is another idea I had, which is 3 Jews: the Orthodox Jew, the conservative Jew, and the Reformed Jew, who is ready for Christmas. And that may be the end of it. No, there's my favorite of all the caricatures I ever did. It's Edward G. Robinson in the scene from the woman in the window. He was great to draw. You didn't have to be a caricaturist to do a caricature of Edward G. Robinson. He had a face that was easy to do, but I loved him as an actor, and I think I say in my book that if I were a pharaoh, I'd be buried with that picture, that caricature that I did of him. I think that's the end of it.
So Ed, before we go to a couple of questions, let's do a quick lightning round. Why Mary Astor, and why not like Irene Dunne or Jean Arthur?
Well, it was because of how I found out about her. When I married Nancy, we moved into a cheap tenement, a railroad tenement, for $97.17 was the rent. It was a rent controlled, and it was a mess. And I had to rip up the linoleum in the kitchen because it was rotting. And underneath the linoleum was front pages from the Daily News and the Daily Mirror. And it was all about the scandal where Mary Astor's diary had been stolen by her husband to prove that she was an unfit mother. And after that, I got hold of her memoir. She was a terrific writer, and I thought her story was worth telling. And I lived with that for over 40 years. And I kept telling myself, but I was busy. I was a successful illustrator, and I never had a chance to do it. And suddenly, when the computer came along, there went a lot of jobs. And so I had the time to at last do my Mary Astor book. And
okay, four presidents, who's your favorite to draw? Nixon, Bush, Reagan, or Trump?
No, Nixon was wonderful. You can't beat Nixon. He wanted so much to be loved. I mean, and he was such a terrible, I mean, he was really a crook, but I always felt sorry for him because he was so homely. It must be awful to be that homely. He went to the dark side very easily. He was really, the number of crimes, the number of crimes that they all did is shocking. As you know, a lot of my book, it tells about the illegal acts that all the presidents of my lifetime did. Am I talking too long?
No.
Are we running out of time?
I just wanted to say before I turn it back over to Nadine that my family has bought 50 copies of your book, and that's our Christmas gift to our friends this year.
You only have 50 friends? Come on, Graydon.
Not everybody gets one. Okay, this is a prized possession. I urge others to do the same, and I'm going to turn it over to Nadine.
Okay.
And I urge everyone to do the same. The link to the book is in the chat. So please, it makes a beautiful holiday present, as Graydon mentioned. So please check it out. It's a wonderful book. Too many questions to really get to. We only have time for a few. So let's get to it. Here's a question from Ed. He writes, as a history major, one of my favorite covers you did was Clinton's inauguration with former presidents sitting in the stands behind him. How long did the artwork for that cover take to create, and is it available in any reproductions?
I don't know if it's available, of course, in my book, but I don't know of any larger reproductions of it. I have no idea how long it took me, but I did several covers for the New Yorker that had a lot of people in it, and they usually took about almost a week. Usually 4 or 5 days would do it. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about that cover was that originally I had Clinton always had long speeches. He was very proud of how articulate he was and would talk and talk and talk. So I had Theodore Roosevelt looking at his wristwatch, and then the checker at the New Yorker insisted that men wore pocket watches. And in point of fact, some men did wear wristwatches, but during World War I, all men wore wristwatches because of grenades. You had to count seconds before you threw the grenade, and you also had to you had to march at bombard at the same time as somebody at the other end. So you had to have second hands, and everybody wore wristwatches. I'm sorry to get off on these tangents.
Oh, no worries at all. Another question from an anonymous viewer. Which of the encounters, the artist meetings, series was your favorite?
Well, I already said that the Degas and Mary Cassatt was my favorite picture, but during the doing them, my wife had her own books. Towards the end of the series, Nancy was writing a book about women war correspondents during the Second World War, and she and I insisted on doing the story about Joan Crawford meeting Betty Davis for the first time, or the opposite way, Betty Davis meeting Joan Crawford, who was a big star at the time. And she didn't want to do it. Nancy had elevated taste. I was just a movie groupie, so I loved doing movie stuff. And she regarded it as rather vulgar, and so she didn't want to write it. So the one meeting that I wrote I'd have to say was my favorite because I wrote it. And it was a funny story.
Right. One final question, and it is also from an anonymous viewer. What is coming up next for you?
What kind of is next?
Yeah.
I've made a resolution to stay out of doctors' offices. That's my plans for the future. I have a open door at the New York Times book review, and I'm hoping to do something called the Literati on a monthly basis. I've done about 8 or 9 literati pieces for the book review, and I hope to continue doing them. And I'm not averse to taking it easy now, being 92.
Amazing.
Well, you don't, I mean, oh, yes. You can tell. I think that we're out of time. Thank you so much, Graydon. Thank you so much, Ed. Again, everyone, thank you everyone for joining us. Again, the link for the book is in the chat. To find out more about Airmail, the website is airmail.com.
Here's the book.
There's the book. Please buy it. Again, wonderful holiday present. And I think one last comment from Adam, who says, thank you for a wonderful, entertaining talk, worthy staying up until 1 a.m. London time. So it's 8 p.m. in New York. And thank you again to both of you for this wonderful discussion. Thank you everyone for joining us, and stay well, be safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.